Freak up room, no see bite and never bite. Fast water women in the girls down in the guys. Fin non see black, you right fine. OMG, Mac 4, Robin C, yelling that night. Hot stove talk, Robin C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus toss of those in my city life. White. Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, Trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Rock the deafening in black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm fit to be in sight. Match riding high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces for the fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer, in the orange we unite. Match forever, our victory in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove, episode 21 of the offseason. How is everybody doing today on this Monday, December 30th? Almost the new year, and we're still talking about what the Mets are going to do with their roster for the 2025 season, and we're going to get started with all the topics there on the side today. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful Monday to talk Mets baseball. We're still waiting for that next major move to happen for our New York Mets. It seems like this fan base is getting pretty antsy, Rob. That's the feeling that I'm getting with the comments that I've been seeing, all the comments in the live chat underneath our videos on social media. Everybody's antsy. The Mets have a lot of expectations again this year. Last year, we know they started off with no expectations, and naturally they got to the League Championship Series. And now that there's actual expectations, fans really want a strong offseason to be confident enough to go into the 2025 season, knowing that this team can compete with the likes of the Dodgers and the rest of the NL, the top dogs in the NL. So I'm excited to be talking Mets baseball. We got a lot of big names to talk about today, and perhaps the Mets being in on them. As always, the shameless plugging. Subscribe to both channels. Make sure to hit the thumbs up on both live chat streams as well, on Rob's channel and on my channel. And let's get into it. Should be a good discussion.
Yeah, and as you said, the New York Mets are contenders. They are not going to be a surprise team anymore. There is a bullseye on this New York Mets team, regardless of the outcome of this offseason. You get Juan Soto, you spent the biggest contract in baseball history, you're going to have a target on your back, and nobody likes you, right? You're going to be a hated team throughout baseball now, even though everybody already hates Steve Cohen, but now you're going to hate the players, the organization, the fans, right? Everything is going to be a target for this New York Mets team, and they got to step up, and it still takes a little bit more of a craft from David Stearns to put this roster together and have the target on our back, but at the same time actually win while there's expectations. So we'll see how that goes. But first, we got to talk about the rumors that have been, I guess, piling up a little bit ever since the offer from the Mets for Teoscar Hernandez, and it lit up a lot of light bulbs into everybody's minds when you're like, wow, they were going after Teoscar Hernandez. Why is that? Some people are like, oh, DH, outfield. But then, if you really look at it, the Mets kind of have an outfield ready to go. But what did they like about Teoscar Hernandez? The versatility, right? He can DH. He can play, basically all the outfield positions, mostly the corners, but could play all three outfield positions if needed. And he provides a very good bat in the lineup. So you do wonder, you're like, wow, okay, so they were looking for versatility. And then everybody's mind, from fans to reporters, shifted right to Anthony Santander. And it makes a lot of sense, right? You did a video yesterday. I did a video today in regards to Anthony Santander. Why is he so popular, or why is the shift to Anthony Santander there more prominent than you probably would have thought about a week ago? Well, it's the versatility factor, right? He can play first base. He can play the corners in the outfield. He can DH. He's a switch hitter. It's basically molded into the David Stearns player. Every guy on this team so far has versatility, right? We know Juan Soto wasn't David Stearns, pet project. It was Steve Cohen's, but everybody else that David Stearns has brought in has been versatile. You see how the pitching staff is getting developed as they can transition to a bullpen or rotation. A lot of projects. Same thing with like Nimmo can play left and center, right? You got Juan Soto. I know he's only a right fielder, but that's not David Stearns' thing right there. You got Siri, traded for Tyrone Taylor, all versatile guys that can play all three outfield positions. Third base, Vientos can play first base, right? That's something that is talked about as well. McNeil can play the outfield, can play second base, and we go on and on and on. So versatility is a big deal for David Stearns, and Anthony Santander fits that mold, Chris. And I do wonder, do you think now the shift is more towards Anthony Santander? Everybody wants Pete Alonso back, right? As much as I throw negative comments a lot of the times during our streams, we all want Pete Alonso back, but it's seeming more and more like David Stearns and the New York Mets are trying to get 2 more bats into this lineup in any way possible. Because if it was Teoscar Hernandez that became a New York Met, all signs probably lead to one of the 3 other free agents in Santander, Alonso, or Bregman. But it seems like it's both 2 more bats that are going to add up to this lineup. So what are your thoughts on the Anthony Santander situation?
Listen, I think that the recent report from Will Salmon directly of The Athletic has everything to do with this as well. Because, per that report from Will Salmon, I said it in my video, I think you said it in your video, stating the fact that although Santander is still probably going to prioritize a longer-term deal, as he should, he's coming off of a career year. The OPS for Santander has been going up over the last 3 years. In relation to Pete Alonso's, it's going down. Again, we can have the compare and contrast and the combinations that we both like, right? But it's generally thought that Santander is going to prioritize a longer term deal, and as he should. We're talking about a guy that is entering his age 30 season. He's right smack in the middle of his prime. So why wouldn't he be in line for a 4 or 5 year deal if it's on the table? But the second half of that report states that there have been some short term discussions for short-term deals being had between teams that are not specified. We don't know if it's the Mets, and we don't know who it is around the league, and Anthony Santander's camp. And if history would repeat itself with the Mets having a 2-year offer out there for Teoscar Hernandez. And by the way, Teoscar Hernandez, the first go around to the Dodgers, he was in line for a multi-year deal as well last offseason, and he decided to take the 1-year deal. Could Anthony Santander do the same thing? Now, for me, I think that if Santander is steadfast and he is not going to budge off of a 4 or 5 year deal, I don't think the Mets are going to be in, quite simply. I don't think that they're going to be in. I think that outside of an Alonso and Bregman, the rest of the bats on the market, whether you're talking about a guy like Jesse Winker, Jerickson Profar, anybody else that's not named Alonso or Bregman, all bets are off for a long-term deal. And we're even having those discussions with Pete Alonso right now. The Mets don't want to offer him a long-term deal. So it's really only Bregman that they're probably willing to open the bank up a little bit in terms of the money and the years. Santander is fantastic because, like you said, he is very versatile. If something happens where the Mets don't reach an agreement with Pete Alonso, Santander has some first base experience. It's not vast, right? I think it's 12 games in 23 and then 1 game in 2024, but he at least has that experience to be that emergency option depending on what happens with the third base rotation, whether it's Bregman and Vientos moving over or whoever else enters that picture via trade or what have you. But yeah, Rob, I think that there is some merit to these rumors and these speculations. Again, the Mets haven't directly, as per Will Salmon's report, they're not directly tied into him in terms of there's concrete interest. We can only deduce that if they had a 2-year deal out for Teoscar Hernandez and they catch wind of Santander discussing short-term deals, it would be a no-brainer for them to go ahead and approach Santander and his agent and be like, hey, listen, we've got a spot open for you. And at that point, you not only solve maybe first base and corner outfield, but you also solve the DH because Santander, even though he's a better left-handed hitter than he is a right-handed hitter, he is a switch hitter, which would be awesome because at that point, you would have no need at that point for Starling Marte, and you can move off of him. And then you could also give Ronnie Mauricio a little bit more time to adjust and come back stronger from that ACL injury, whether it's the tail end of 2025 or whether that's just straight up in 2026, depending on what happens for the rest of this offseason. So again, this market is a little bit slower to sort of formulate on the Mets front than an Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso naturally, because we've been talking about Bregman and Alonso for so long now. But Anthony Santander, if he is willing to sign a one-year deal, just like Teoscar last season, or last offseason, or if he's able and willing to sign a 2-year deal, maybe with an opt-out after the first year for a little bit of added protection, because going back onto the free agent market at age 32 really isn't the end of the world. And I think that these players understand that, especially with what Teoscar Hernandez got, being 33 years old right now with the Los Angeles Dodgers, getting a 3-year extension. So again, it's not the end of the world for them to go back onto the free agent market in their age 31 and 32, seasons. But would he be willing, if there is a 5-year deal on the table, let's just say, for example, for Santander, I would find it very hard to believe that he passes that up in favor of a shorter term deal. Just my 2 cents.
Well, where I differ with you when it comes to a long-term deal, I think Santander, they would do a long-term deal over Bregman. We know about Alonso. They want to do a short-term deal, right?
Sure.
You know that, right? I think the reason why I think the long-term deal will fit the Stearns mold more in Santander is because he's so versatile in different options, right? I think Bregman would probably be the third baseman, right? I think it'd be obvious. And, that's where I think the Mets would probably, obviously shift Vientos to first base, and then we'll have a conversation about Pete Alonso at a later date. But I think Santander gives the Mets still an option to bring back Pete Alonso. And worst case scenario, I'm going to say worst case scenario, but plan B option is that, all right, we got Santander. Pete Alonso doesn't come back, he can play first base, right? And then you can work on other ways of getting your lineup better, right? You can still get Bregman and DH Vientos. I know that doesn't excite a lot of people, but that's the possibility there. And even if you get Santander, you still got to, figure out what you're going to do with him on a daily basis if you do bring back Pete Alonso, because where's he going to play? He can DH most of the time, but, he probably, you got to put that bat in the lineup. You're not going to pay him and not put that bat in the lineup. So I think Anthony Santander probably fits. I think Bregman and Santander both fit the long-term deal situation just because of the type of players they are. Fits what David Stearns looks into a player. That's why Pete Alonso doesn't fit that mold of a long-term deal with David Stearns. Pete Alonso's not versatile. He doesn't play anywhere but first. He can DH, but he doesn't. Pete Alonso already says he doesn't like to DH, so he's at first base and nowhere else. So he kind of, I'm not going to say blocks anywhere, but he kind of, doesn't really. That doesn't what David Stearns. Everybody he brings in has some type of versatility, and Bregman and Stearns, Bregman and Santander does that. So I find it interesting that the Mets have been rumored with Bregman for a month now, and now Santander is all of a sudden coming out of nowhere. But even the Teoscar Hernandez, right? We had no idea the Mets were involved in Teoscar Hernandez, and it was clearly closer than we thought, as they were clearly in the final stages, or at least the finalists to get Teoscar Hernandez until he went back to the Dodgers. So they were very much in on him until basically the last moment, and nobody knew. So and that's what I'm saying. Like, the turn to Anthony Santander just makes sense for everybody. And then when reports are coming out that it just makes sense, you go to Hernandez to Santander. Sure. It's just, you're starting to paint the picture here with David Stearns and what the Mets are trying to do here. They're trying to get 2 bats. That's a fact. And I don't think they care what combination it is, to be quite honest with you. I think whatever 2 they can get, they'll get. Like, I don't think they're going to cry over if it's Santander and Bregman. It's Santander and Bregman. I don't think they care. If it's an Alonso, I think it's more Alonso Bregman than Alonso Santander, to be quite honest with you. But I don't think they care what combination it is, to be quite honest with you, because that's the way it's been going about it. Because if they would have got Teoscar Hernandez, was he just going to be a DH for the majority of the time? Like, it is a thought process. Like, we have an outfield, so what are they doing? And I just think it's more about the bats at this point and the versatility they could have on the field.
Well, it's two things for me. And I said one of the reasons last stream being the fact that they probably don't want anything to do with Starling Marte being a regular contributor on this team. They don't have any confidence in him, whether it's performance wise or whether it's injury wise. And that would provide insurance to Starling Marte. And we've already heard the rumors of them trying to offload Marte this offseason if they could find a trade suitor for him. But guess what? Even if they can't, I'm not ruling out just a straight up buyout if they do have an alternative plan. And also secondary to that in, the Starling Marte discussion is that you're starting to see a picture. And by the way, something that we haven't mentioned is that there were some rumors out of the Dominican Winter League that Jose Siri suffered an injury. I don't know what severity level of that is, and I don't know where it was on his hand, elbow, whatever, but he is hurt. So who knows if he's going to be ready for spring training or not. Hopefully he's okay. Because it just sucks. It would suck to lose another guy in winter ball, right, with a winter ball injury. But the other discussion for this to be had is that, you get another outfielder, a corner outfielder per se, whether it's Santander or whether it was Teoscar Hernandez or whether it's Jesse Winker, because Winker's still out there and could provide you that defense, especially in left field. He's not great at defense by any stretch of the imagination, but he is serviceable out there at the very minimum. Do they want to get Brandon Nimmo more reps at the DH spot and get him off his feet?
Yes.
That's something that we also have to take into consideration. He's coming off of that foot injury. He's had a lengthy, injury riddled career. I mean, let's just, call it for what it is at this point. Let's call a spade with Brandon Nimmo. The injuries are a concern. Are they wary about putting him every day in left field? And that's why maybe they could prioritize, or they wanted to prioritize Teoscar Hernandez. And that's why it makes so much sense. Another name to go out, and just when we're talking about combinations of it all, I do think that, Bregman and Alonso is a little bit more situational fitting, because I don't really see Santander and Pete Alonso being that answer. Although you'll have your first baseman, you'll have your DH there, and then you can just leave Mark Vientos at third base. That's probably your worst possible defensive combination. But you also have a couple of guys out there, at least one guy in particular. I know everybody wants to talk about the second guy too, but I actually had someone mention me over on X today about Alex Verdugo, who I want no parts of. I'm good on Alex Verdugo. I'd rather the Mets, if they're going to go a shorter term deal for a veteran bat like Verdugo, just give me Kike Hernandez instead. Give me Kike Hernandez. I'll take him. And I'll take Jesse Winker over Verdugo at that point too. So, there's so many different combinations, even beyond Bregman, Santander, and Pete Alonso in that discussion. There's Jesse Winker. I know that we're not talking about Profar all that much. I've been on record stating the fact that I don't think the Mets are going to be in on Profar's market. I would like them to be, though, because he's another guy who I believe is a switch hitter. But he's a guy that just rips the baseball, man. He really does. He's coming off of a 20-plus home run campaign, batting .280. I like Jurickson Profar's game, but again, he's probably going to be wanting a 3-year deal. And if it's consistent with what the Mets were doing with Teoscar Hernandez, you're looking at a 2-year deal max with whoever they bring on. And we're just hoping at this point that Santander lowers that asking price and is willing to take that short-term deal. Again, nothing's concrete. That's why names like Hernandez, Kike Hernandez, not Teoscar, but Kike Hernandez and Jesse Winker are a lot more likely if they're looking for additional outfield help than a Santander. But man, I agree with you. The sentiment overall with any possible combination of those three guys that we just mentioned, if you're grabbing two of those guys and you're selling me on that's the plan, they make your team better 100% than without them. And the other topic of discussion that relates to this is that if they're getting two of these major bats, let's say they get a combination of two of any one of Santander, Alonso, and Bregman, they're probably done on the pitching front. Starting pitching front outside of Sasaki, right? In terms of the payroll allocations of it all. So it's a lot to figure out and it's a lot to keep track of, but there's a lot of different combinations that could make sense. David Stearns is going to have to figure out what makes the most sense with his overall plan of the prospects coming up. You still have to take into account Ronnie Mauricio. Ronnie Mauricio has graduated from one of those younger, youthful guys that has upside potential in the next few seasons to a guy that's like ready right now. He's ready right now or in 2026. And after that, I mean, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Find him a new home if he's not in the plans at that point. So a lot of revolving doors here, and this is what makes David Stern's job so tough. And I hear you all Mets fans, this collective Mets fan base, we've been hearing a lot of chatter about David Stearns and why is he making any moves? I mean, it's just there's a lot of things to consider here with the personnel that you have. What do you do with Starling Marte if you bring on a fifth outfielder, right? Is Jose Siri going to be ready? How are we viewing Luis Angel Acuna and Ronnie Mauricio and their contributions potentially every day in 2025? There's so many things to figure out here.
Yeah, and you brought a great point earlier about Nimmo. We don't know if he's going to be healthy, right? He's still not running right now, and it's almost January. We're a month and a half away. We're 5 weeks away until 6 weeks away until pitchers and catchers, and he could be running by then. He could be doing baseball activity, but if he's not running, he's clearly not doing enough baseball activity, especially in the outfield. So maybe Nimmo's plantar fasciitis is more of an issue than we actually know, because there would be no other reason to go after Teoscar Hernandez except for as a DH, and that wouldn't make sense to me. I mean, I guess a 2-year deal would make sense, but I just feel like there's something going on with Nimmo that we just don't know. And I brought it up earlier. Right? Ronnie Mauricio is actually doing baseball activity at this point now. He's actually taking grounders. There was a video the other day where he was in Port St. Lucie taking grounders. He's running. He's doing everything. So he's at that point where he's doing baseball activity where 6 weeks from now, he'll be ready to go for spring training. There's no guarantee that Nimmo will be ready for spring training. And how can you count on Brandon Nimmo being in left field on an everyday basis where you might think Teoscar Hernandez could have been the left fielder and Nimmo would be the DH just to protect his feet? And that's a strong possibility. And that's why Anthony Santander would make sense. I know he's a right fielder, but he can play both corner outfield positions. Obviously, he's more of a right fielder, but Juan Soto did play a little bit, very little, but a little bit of left field in Yankee Stadium for the Yankees. It was a few games, but he could do that. And in Citi Field, left field is a little bit easier than right field. So I do wonder if they're thinking that on that aspect as well, that they don't trust Nimmo to stay healthy. And that, that could be a huge issue, and why they've been going after, outfielders that we had no thought. Now, a lot of Met fans were like, hey, why don't they go after Teoscar Hernandez? There was no rumors. There was no reports that the Mets were even involved. And yet they were probably one of the finalists, obviously. So it just comes to show you that what we don't hear doesn't mean that they're not in. And Santander is not, I mean, Will Simon did talk about it, but it wasn't really a major like breakthrough, like, oh, they're going after Santander. It just seems likely at this point where Bregman Alonso does seem the obvious duo of choice. But if Alonso's going to continue to play these games and still looking between $175 and $200 million, the Mets can't wait for him. If you got to get Santander, you got to get Bregman in here, you do it. And if Pete Alonso wants to come at the last minute and run back for a 1-year deal, put him at DH or put him at first base and DH one of the guys. Like, that's it. Like, I think the holdup with the New York Mets with David Stearns is because of Pete Alonso. I think Bregman would have been signed already, to be quite honest with you. I think the smoke has been there this whole time. And Stearns and Bregman, I feel like, is the perfect match for these two guys. Stearns loves a guy like that. Run prevention, good bat. I think he hasn't signed yet because they don't know what the hell's going on with Pete Alonso. I think this 3-year, $90 million decline of an offer really opened up the eyes for David Stearns. And I think that's why Teoscar Hernandez was probably on the radar over the last week or so, a week and a half after that offer has been made to Pete Alonso. So I think this was like the final straw. I don't think the Mets are out on Pete Alonso by any means, but I think that 3 years for 90 decline made David Stearns say, okay, you want to play? Go find a better deal elsewhere, because you're probably not going to get $30 million a year from anybody. You might get a longer term deal, but not for that much money. And I think they're pivoting at this point. I don't think they're playing games anymore. I think they're going to go after the three guys you mentioned, is Santander, Bregman, or, somebody else. Maybe a Profar or something like that. Some, guys like that. But I think Bregman or Santander is probably more likely at this point than Pete Alonso. If Pete Alonso does come back, it's going to be very, very late in January, in my opinion. I don't think he's signing anywhere at this point, and the Mets can't wait. You can't wait for Bregman to come off the board. You can't wait for Santander to come off the board, because if you do, then Alonso has the leverage at this point now, and you need to get Alonso back 100% if Bregman and Santander are off the board.
I was just going to say that too, and I have nothing really else contextually to add other than the fact that these are just plan B options. I think that Pete Alonso is still their 1A. But again, I mean, if he is going to be playing hardball, right, without much leverage, so to speak, these are a plan B. Santander is a plan B, to be honest with you. And Bregman, I think Bregman's in line with whoever they get, whether it's Santander or Pete Alonso. I think that the greater issue for Bregman, and we'll get to him here in just a second after we talk about deGrom, but I think Bregman is just that the overall market, whether it's the Red Sox or whether it's the Tigers, and the Tigers seem to be like a very likely option in terms of a destination landing point for Bregman. It's just about if he chooses the Mets at that point, depending on what their offer is. But I think that Santander is definitely a backup option, a plan B, if Pete Alonso were to walk. And there's certain advantages, right, offensively, potentially, of getting a Santander over a Pete Alonso. But again, when we have these discussions about David Stearns and what he likes to deploy out there, fielding wise, are you really, if we're not confident in Mark Vientos shifting over to first base, are we really confident with the lack of sample size to go for along with Santander at first base? Are we really confident for him to fill in and be a first baseman on an everyday basis as well? So again, the first baseman market keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So if Pete Alonso isn't it, then who is? Goldschmidt's gone. Nathaniel Lowe has been traded for. Josh Bell just went back to the Nationals on a 1-year deal last night, right? There's, Vladimir Guerrero. A lot of people still want to talk about Vladimir Guerrero. I don't think he's getting traded this offseason. He could. I'm not saying it's out of the question, but I don't think it's going to be to the Mets. I think that Pete Alonso, the Mets understand that it's Pete Alonso at this point, or they're going to have to go and trade for somebody else like a Yandy Diaz. But I don't know how realistic it is for them to just move Vientos over to first base and just call it a day. I don't know how confident they are in that happening. I'm not saying he can't do it, and I'm not saying Santander can't do it either. It's good that they at least can do it to some capacity, but if the Mets are trying to maximize not only their offense, but also their defense, and I'm not saying Pete Alonso is the best at first base, his defensive metrics don't scream that, but he's a natural first baseman, unlike the other two. So
yeah, so it's going to be interesting because again, it's quite obvious now the Mets are in on two bats. It's just a matter of which ones, and if they got to pivot, they will for whoever they need to pivot to. And I think the Alonso 3 for 90 has just been a real eye opener for David Stearns and the New York Mets. And I still think Bregman is probably the likely candidate to be a Met, but we'll see how that goes, and we'll talk about Bregman in detail a little bit more. So Jacob deGrom, that news came out of nowhere, right? We know the Rangers are kind of shedding payroll. Look, they got a World Series already. We knew they were spending like drunken sailors. We're not shocked about that. I figured they were going to spend about 2-3 years with this core, and then they were going to shed payroll because of course they're going to do that. They got the new ballpark. They already got a championship. So let's shed a little bit of payroll. They're probably still going to be good. The AL West is not as good as, other divisions. So, they can still compete. It's not happening, guys. All right. I'm sorry to burst anybody's bubble, right? You can say whatever you want to say about getting Jacob deGrom. You love Jacob deGrom. Oh, he will be back. He hasn't pitched much in 4 years over the last 4 seasons. But after everything, his contract has a no trade clause. And you really think that Jacob deGrom is going to approve a trade back to the New York Mets, where he probably didn't like it as it is, shift his family from the place where he bought a house, by the way, in Texas, and come back to New York and move his family, he's not doing that. As much as he might be looking for a championship again, even though he was a part of one, even though he didn't pitch, he's not doing it, guys. It's not happening. He's gonna remain a Texas Ranger unless he really wants to come back to the Mets, which I hardly doubt. It's not happening. So that whole concept, that whole thought process, I don't know where that rumor came from. Maybe I don't know if the Rangers said that deGrom's available. I haven't heard that myself, but I mean the rumor came from somewhere. It's not happening with the New York Mets, guys. I'm sorry to burst everybody's bubble, but it's not happening, Chris.
And to go along with that, I mean, who cares about what Jacob deGrom wants? We don't want Jacob deGrom, or at least you should. You're a Mets fan. I mean, I'm looking at this from our perspective and from the New York Mets perspective. We don't want him back. I don't want him back. I don't care about the sentimental value. I don't care about the sentimental value. That yes, he's one of the greatest Mets, right? To take the mound, right? That's fine. That's awesome. He's 37 years old. He's pitched 197 innings over the last 4 seasons. Can we wrap our heads around that? 197 innings only for Jacob deGrom since 2021. No, thank you. Absolutely not, especially with that contract hit. And honestly, I don't even think the Rangers need to shed payroll. I don't know where that rumor is coming from, but they posted 2 consecutive seasons of upwards of $250 million allocated on their payroll, and they're at 193 right now if 2025 were to start today. They don't need to get rid of anybody, to be honest with you. And in fact, they're probably going to add another addition or 2 from now until the end of the offseason. But yeah, like, let alone the fact that deGrom, even though he kind of pushed back on the notion that he left the Mets because he didn't like New York, we could kind of make our own inferences and sort of guesses about that. I don't want to speak for him clearly, right? But, at the end of the day, probably he doesn't want to come back to New York as one, but even if he did, we don't want him. We don't want him. I don't want him. I'm not going to speak for this Mets fan base because I'm sure same thing with Pete Alonso. People, if Pete Alonso leaves and wants to come back at some point, you're going to want to take the guy that's performed well for the New York Mets, for a very long time, numerous years. But at this point, with what the Mets need to get to the promised land, Jacob deGrom isn't it, man.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. I don't know where it came from. It just popped out of nowhere on Twitter. It was like, what the hell is going on? Or X, whatever the hell you want to call it. Like, I just don't know. Like, and I'm looking at him like, guys, like, I don't care how bad you might want him back or some might want him back. I don't want him back. I mean, I don't need another injury-prone guy that we have to, pamper through the rotation. We already got Senga. We might have Sasaki. Like, I don't need 3 guys in a rotation that we have to, give days off during the year, every 6th day or 7th day, just so they can feel 100% and ready to go. Like, I don't need that no more. Every day it seemed like a mission to get deGrom on the mound. I don't want to deal with that. As great as he was a freaking baby. He cried about everything, every little thing. He had to feel nothing to get on that mound, especially the later years that he was in Met, the final year and a half or 2 that he was a Met. We all forget in 2022 how injured he was, and then he came back in the second half, and there was a certain time there where he didn't pitch because he didn't feel perfect. Like, I don't want to deal with that no more. I really don't. So, you know what? Get that out of your heads, guys. It's not happening. I don't care. Even if David Stearns wants him, deGrom has to approve the trade, and I doubt he's approving the trade to go back to New York. 100%.
It's not even a David Stearns type of move, right? For a free agent. Why would it be for a guy like deGrom that has all that injury history? And deGrom, I mean, again, nothing against deGrom. Enjoyed his years in New York and watching him pitch when he was healthy. Still respect him as a fantastic New York Met, but at the end of the day, I feel like some people have a very hard time letting bygones be bygones. And at this point, that's not helping the New York Mets in any way, even if they need a top line starter like we've been saying. There's a lot of better options out there to prioritize than Jacob deGrom. So
yeah, exactly. So, it's interesting.
Short topic. On to the next.
Yeah, please, God. Market for Bregman, right? We Chris brought it up, right? It was the Red Sox where I don't know. It seemed like the Red Sox are like, I'm not going to say pivoting, because there was a report where they offered Cassis and I think a prospect, Yoshida for Castillo, and the Mariners declined that. which is interesting because that's two MLB guys ready to go. They get their first baseman, they get an outfielder. Very odd. What were the Mariners thinking? I think because Yoshida and Cassis. I think Cassis has like 2 years left on his rookie deal, so he'll be coming up on arbitration and a contract. And Yoshida is costing a few $1,000,000. I don't think the Mariners want to add any type of payroll. Like it's just a weird scenario why the Mariners wouldn't accept that. But that leads to the Mets maybe possibility of getting to that point. But whatever. Market for Bregman, Red Sox and the Tigers, right? The Tigers seem like they've been the most aggressive for Bregman, but there was a latest report, I think like an hour ago, maybe when I saw it, it was an hour ago before we started the stream, that the Tigers and Bregman are well off on a contract. So if they're that aggressive, but they're that far apart, tells me that either Bregman really doesn't want to go there, or the Tigers are not that serious in trying to get Alex Bregman. I don't know what your take is on it when it comes to the Tigers, but if they were that aggressive pursuing him, and if they were quote unquote the favorite, why has the contracts have been so far apart? When if you're aggressive on a player, wouldn't you be a little bit more aggressive on a contract for that player? And that's why I still lean towards Bregman coming to the New York Mets, just because it's probably a better situation, in my opinion. I think that. I mean, I'm not saying the Tigers or the Mets, or you can say the Mets are better than the Tigers. Sure, the American League is very easy. I don't know if Bregman wants to be in the AL anymore. I don't know, right? He didn't take the offer from the Astros. The Red Sox and Bregman don't seem like there's nothing really going on there. And the Tigers and him are far apart. So I think the Mets, again, are waiting in the wind here and waiting to pounce, just like, Teoscar Hernandez, even though I think he was always going back to LA, but it might have been a situation where he wanted that third year and the Mets weren't willing to give. So what are your thoughts on the Bregman market right now? Do you think the Mets are still in the driver's seat in that situation with Bregman, or do you think the Tigers will have something to say about it?
I like to look at with these. I don't want to say Detroit's kind of a small market team, right? I think that we can sort of assess that. I like to look at the payroll of these teams before handing out a big contract like this, because if you asked me about Bregman to the Tigers before the Gleyber Torres signing, I would have told you, yeah, probably that's happening. But they're at $106 million right now. And in recent memory, the most that they've had in terms of a payroll is back in like 2021 or something like that. It was around 136 million. So they're about $30 million away from that, which would be basically what Bregman's going to make, $29 to $30 million is what I'm projecting. I don't know. They might have to free up some room in order for that to happen in terms of the actual payroll. I don't know what direction they're headed in terms of what they want to spend. I don't really follow Detroit Tigers baseball all that often. I don't know what their front office is saying. I don't know what their owners like. I have no idea, but it just seems like a money issue with what you're saying right here between Bregman and the Tigers. And that's what's holding it up, because situationally they need a third baseman, right? I mean, Torres is probably going to play second base for them. I think that's already documented. And I think that they're going to move that guy, Cole Keith, over to first base. And that's how they're going to address that right side of the infield. But they still have a glaring hole at third base, which Bregman could fill. But the money is an issue there. And then, in contrast to that, it's a complete 180 about the Red Sox hurdles, is that they have the money to spend and they probably will do it. It's just that, are you maximizing the potential of an Alex Bregman signing if you're going to just put him at second base, which is what they're going to have to do? That's what they're going to have to do. So it doesn't really make sense unless they move Tristan Cassis for a pitcher like you just mentioned. So those two teams have hurdles to go through in their own respective manners. And that's where I kind of like the Mets could move Vientos over to first base or just be an everyday DH. This whole talk about stunting the growth of Mark Vientos is ludicrous to me, to be honest with you. I don't buy into that at all. I agree he's young. I agree he played a serviceable third base. But when you have the ability to get an Alex Bregman and just move Vientos over, not to DH. I would definitely DH Mark Vientos in that scenario if they're still in on Pete Alonso. But at the worst case first base, if they're actually serious about doing that, this makes the most sense to me monetarily and position wise, right? Over the Tigers and the Red Sox. It just all depends on what they want to do with Vientos at the end of the day. For me, I know a lot of people are going to disagree. You got a 25-year-old guy, first major league season, full season almost for Vientos. He killed it. He played a serviceable third base. Everybody was worried about his defense. Did he have the best analytical stats at third base? No, he didn't. The DRS and OAA or whatever you want to look at for defensive metrics, they weren't the best for Mark Vientos. His range, given his stature and size, still isn't the best either. We've seen him get caught a little bit flat-footed. His arm is fantastic. You don't question his arm. But again, is he someone that I would cry over moving from third base over to DH when he's still going to rake for you at the plate, regardless of whether he's going to be playing in the field or not? I'm not quite sure I'm going to cry over that if I get a Gold Glove caliber, player of the caliber of Alex Bregman. You know what I mean? So I think the situations and what the Tigers and the Red Sox would have to go through in order to get him on into those organizations is a little bit of not a reach, because it's certainly doable for both of them, but they have that hurdle, whereas the Mets don't really have any hurdles if they don't want to make any hurdles for themselves in terms of excuses to bring on a guy like Alex Bregman.
Yeah, exactly. I already think Stearns has already proven that he does not care. If it makes the team better, you'll figure it out, right? I mean, why do the Dodgers? They just keep signing everybody and they just plug and play, right? If you got to move, right? They moved Mookie Betts, one of the best players in baseball, to right field when they wanted to get Trey Turner, right? They didn't care, right? Mookie Betts played everywhere. Right, second, third. I think he's going back to second base. I think I heard. So they're moving Mookie Betts, who's one of the best players in baseball, everywhere. So if the Dodgers can do it, the Mets can do it. And Vientos is here and going to remain here because of his bat, not because of his glove. Right? If you can get Bregman at third base as a vacuum at third base, who was better defensively than Vientos, and provide that bat in the lineup and still have Vientos in the lineup, which again, Vientos can still play the field. He can play third base to give Bregman a day off. Or if we get Alonso a day off. There's a lot of options there. So these guys are going to play. But if you're looking at the whole overall picture, it is to get more offense in this lineup. Because if you're going with the rotation that they might be going with, even if they do get Sasaki somehow, some way, you got to score runs. And at this point, you just get guys and you'll figure it out. You shouldn't feel sorry for Vientos. He's going to be in the major leagues. He's going to hit, right? He's here for his bat, not because of his glove, even though he's very serviceable, probably better than that. I think he had only 5 errors in 108 games. But you're right. He was getting caught flat-footed, right? He's not great on coming in on balls. When he gets to the ball, he got a cannon for an arm, so he gets those plays. But you can go with Bregman. It's just that simple. It really is just simple. So, in my opinion, you do it, and I think that's the reason why you've been seeing so much smoke when it comes to Bregman and the Mets, because it makes a lot of sense, right? You're still keeping Vientos' bat in the lineup, and you get one of the better third basemen defensively in baseball, along with 25 home runs, with a 250 average, 85 to 90 RBIs. So you add in even more potential offense to the lineup, still you can probably have one of the best defensive left side of the infield in baseball. Like, that's how good it can be. And again, believe Stearns when he says it, run prevention matters. That was a big deal. Defense was a big deal for the Mets last year. Their defense was extremely good last year. And that was a big reason why they were able to get back to where they were, get the 89 wins, get to a playoff spot. Their defense was a big key in that. And David Stearns is going to continue that run prevention motto along with bolstering the lineup. And Bregman is a perfect match for the New York Mets, because out of all the teams, even the Tigers have a young prospect. I forgot his name. I know somebody said it in the chat. That is a third baseman. He's ready to go. If not this year, definitely next year. They're not going to sign Bregman to a 5-6 year deal. And where are you going to put him? Right? You just signed Gleyber Torres. Yeah, you can put Bregman over to second base if the Gleyber becomes a free agent again. But is Bregman really willing to do that long term? I don't know if he can stay in the position he is with the Mets and go to third base. He can't do that with the Red Sox. Devers is there. He'd be playing second base for the Red
Right.
Sox. So it just doesn't make sense anywhere else. I'm not saying that he wants to be a Met or, the Mets are the best place to go. I'm not going to say that. I don't know what's in his mind. But the obvious choice for positional for the number of years is the New York Mets, because the Mets can put Vientos at the DH spot. Or, again, if the Mets don't sign Alonso, he would be the first baseman. And again, we forget that Vientos played first base in the minors, right? When Beatty and Mauricio were in the minors, where do you think Vientos was playing? He was DHing and playing first base. The only reason why he played third base in the minors prior to him coming up was Beatty was in the majors, Mauricio was hurt, and they put him at third base. That was the only reason why. Like, it's not like they put him there because, we can't wait to see Vientos at third base. That's where he was because nobody else was playing third base at the moment in the minors. He was playing first base and DH the majority of the time prior to Beatty being the starter and Mauricio getting hurt. That's why he played third base. So let's not make it out to be like Vientos never played first base. This isn't Lucas Duda in left field. All right. This is a guy that played first base. He is built like a first baseman. He would be okay with that. If that's the case, he would be fine. I'm not saying he would scoop balls like Alonso, but he knows the position and he'll be fine there if Bregman is the choice and you make your team better.
So, and exactly what you just said, Rob, this is not any sort of knock on Mark Vientos.
Absolutely.
He had a fantastic 2024 campaign. But when we're talking about win now mode, if you have the opportunity to just build an elite left side of your infield, defensively and offensively with Lindor and Bregman, you do it, because Mark Vientos, if the numbers don't drop off, which I'm not expecting them to offensively, he will still hit baseballs for you well, whether he's playing first or whether he's DHing. So this whole stunting the growth of Mark Vientos as a ball player just because you're going to take him out of third base if a Bregman signing happens is just really nonsense to me at that point. And I understand why they're saying that, but for me, I'm making my team better no matter what at all costs this offseason, and Bregman does that for you 100%, no doubt.
Yeah, and I see people in the chat saying, Santander's best year is Alonso's worst year. We're not comparing the two guys, right? We're not at all. You got to stop comparing the guys and look at them individually, right? There's a pretty good chance the Mets are going to get two of those bats. You have to look at them as a pair or individually. You can't compare guys because Bregman isn't the same player or even Santander, right? Santander showed a lot of power this year, but he is a 25 to 32 home run guy, right? He is, I would say 30 home run guy, right? We're not comparing. Pete Alonso is a pure power hitter. These other two guys are much better situationally. That's the difference with these two guys. And they provide 25 to 30 home runs, right? That's the difference. They don't get all their RBIs on home runs like Alonso. These guys hit the ball the other way. They spray the ball. When Bregman's not pulling the ball for a home run, he's spraying the ball over the field. The same thing like Anthony Santander, who is also a switch hitter, by the way. Stop comparing those guys. We are not comparing those guys because it's not fair to either one of those players, because you can compare a good thing from one player to a bad thing to another, right? Pete Alonso sucks with runners in scoring position, but Bregman and Santander, at least over their career, have been better, right? But we're not doing that. We're just doing it individually, and any duo of those guys could help this team. That's all we're talking about, right? We're trying to get better. We don't care who's better compared to this guy. That's doesn't make sense, because if you get two of those guys on the team, they're going to help your team at the very least. That's what we're trying to do here. So I just wanted to open up that picture for a second, Chris. I don't think you're comparing them either, right?
No. Again, at this point, we're at the part of the offseason where if someone wants to be a New York Met and they're willing to meet David Stearns halfway and become a New York Met, I don't really care at this point who it is because I
No.
think both of these guys are capable at the bat. Both of these guys have their advantages and disadvantages in the field in terms of the situational aspect of it. And at this point, I like Santander. He provides more flexibility, being a righty and a lefty switch hitter. He's a better lefty by far, especially power wise. But at this point, do I want Pete Alonso back? Yes. Would I prioritize Pete Alonso? Yes. If Santander is the guy, hypothetically, we're speaking hypothetically, obviously, because this hasn't really picked up enough steam yet, then I'm happy. I'm happy either way because any one of these combinations makes the Mets better. And that's what we're here to talk about, what makes the Mets better. And situationally, that's something that's going to go great into my next point of this next topic in Verdugo versus Winker. Jesse Winker is a great situational hitter. He is a fantastic situational hitter. And we saw that especially come playoff time. Remember that game 1 of the NLDS in Philly, when Zach Wheeler was mowing everybody down the Mets lineup. He was throwing 99 to 100 miles per hour, fastball up in the zone. Everybody was swinging right underneath it. They couldn't touch it basically at the letters or above. Jesse Winker was the guy to set the tone and get on base against Zach Wheeler via the walk. Let's take a look at some Jesse Winker numbers in 2024. Runners in scoring position for Jesse Winker last season. 132 plate appearances. He hit 327 with a 962 OPS with 5 home runs and 44 RBIs with runners in scoring position. And in addition to that, 2 outs with runners in scoring position. He hit an even 300 with a 933 OPS and 18 RBIs. Late and close in the clutch statistics category, he hit an even 300, 931 OPS, 533 slug with that late and close situation. All of these are getting pulled off of Baseball Reference, so you guys can take a look at the split yourselves. All I'm saying is that if there is a situation with runners on, and if it's late in the ball game, whether it's a tie ball game or the Mets are either ahead or down by 1 run, this guy is who you want at the plate in Jesse Winker. Alex Verdugo is not that. So this really shouldn't be any heavy debate. Couple that with the fact that Alex Verdugo, his ground ball rate over the past couple of seasons has just been astronomical. I'm taking Jesse Winker all day.
Yeah, I don't like Verdugo at all, right? He's a pesky guy. He's got that attitude which you like on the team, but he's a double play machine. Like you just talked about the ground ball situation. I mean, every time he came up for the Yankees, it seemed like he hit either a home run or a double play. It was nothing in between. He's an okay fielder. Made a nice couple of plays, but Jesse Winker was here. We see what he can do. He is situationally a very good hitter, right? When you need him, it seems like he come through with a big hit. He got a big hit with the Brewers, hit a big home run against the Phillies in the playoffs. He is a guy that just gets under the skin of other teams, and I freaking love that. That gets him off their game so much. You don't think that kind of annoyed the Brewers or the Phillies in the playoffs? Absolutely it did, right? And we were very pissed off that he didn't play over JD Martinez against the Dodgers. I'm not saying Jesse Winker was going to make or break that series. I'm not saying that at all. But he just brought that edge. He just brought something different to the lineup. And they needed the attitude in that series. And it seemed like when JD Martinez was there, it seemed like it lowered the overall morale of the lineup. Winker brought that motivate. It felt like that aura to the lineup. And it was obvious, except for Carlos Mendoza in that series. So look, it's easy, very easy. If it's Verdugo or Winker, I want Winker, 100%. I just think it makes the most sense. It just does. Now, I don't know what Winker's looking for. I know he said he wants to be back here. But again, if somebody offers him a 2-year deal or a starting role, why wouldn't he take it? Maybe
Right.
he would take less and a 1-year deal to come back to the Mets where he really liked it here. Maybe he would. I don't know. Right, but it's yet to be determined. But if it's up to the Mets, I think they would bring back Winker. Again, if they get Anthony Santander, it might be a lot harder to bring back Jesse Winker, because if they can't get rid of Marte is going to be that other backup outfielder along with Tyron Terra and Siri. So, I don't think they're going to carry 4 bench outfielders, because they're going to need at least 2 infielders on the bench. So that's going to be interesting if they do that.
I'm just going to say that Winker goes hand in hand with Marte. So if the plan is
Right.
Marte to still be on this team and DHing in any capacity, then Jesse Winker makes the most sense. You don't need either of these guys in Winker or Marte if you get a switch hitter in Anthony Santander. So again, it's different situations call for different players and different personnel. If it's not the Mets, I can see the Cincinnati Reds being in on Jesse Winker, bring the guy back. They need another outfielder for a platoon type role, and they also need veteran presence over there. He has the familiarity in Cincinnati. So I think the Mets, if they are running it back with Starling Marte in the last year of his contract, it makes sense to give Carlos Mendoza that lefty option as well as another outfielding option, even over Starling Marte if they don't want Starling Marte in the outfield at all. And also, like I just said, Jesse Winker, the overall numbers in 2024, they're not going to wow you. Jesse Winker's not a guy that's going to make or break a championship team, but he's a guy that is necessary for championship caliber teams to have, right? He simply is. I think of like the Dodgers. They had Kike Hernandez. He just seems to come up big, but he's not a guy that's going to make or break or like scare anybody on any given day in the regular season. I kind of like that comparison. And these are guys that you just need to have on your team, not only for the production, but also just that clubhouse effect as well. But we're not trying to sell you that, okay, the Mets bring back Jesse Winker, they're automatic championship like contenders, and they weren't before a Winker signing. These are guys that you need. But again, different situations call for different things. Santander switch hitter, you don't need Marte or Winker. If you're running it back with Marte, you get Jesse Winker at that point.
Exactly. So I think the overall consensus is Winker over Verdugo. All right, rapid fire time to end the stream, guys. So I'm going to ask Chris a question. He's going to ask me a question, and then we'll answer it very quickly. All right, Chris. Anthony Santander, if the Mets get him, what's the contract?
The Mets get Anthony Santander. The contract would be, oh man. That's so tough because I honestly do think that he is going to get a 4-year deal somewhere. Somewhere he's going to get a 4-year deal. I think he's going to take it. Someone might even be desperate enough, like the Blue Jays, to give him 5 years, to be honest with you. And that is a no-brainer for sure for him. I think if the Mets were to get him on a short-term deal, I would think it would look something like 2-year deal. Man, I don't know. What did Teoscar just get AAV wise? He got 3 for 20. He got 21. You want to say
right? Per year?
You want to say, let's say 2 for 50, opt out after one? What do you think?
Okay, yeah, that's
2
not
for
bad.
50, opt out after one?
I do it.
That's what I think.
All right. What's the question for you?
Jeez. I guess the overall general question in relation back to the actual interest of adding 2 bats. I know you're going to triple down on this because I know you said this in multiple streams already. Are the Mets done adding starting pitchers? Do you think?
My heart says no, my head says yes. So but I'm gonna still say no. I think they're gonna add one more. I'm not saying it's gonna be Castillo. You know, I wouldn't be shocked if they can get a Flaherty on a 1-year deal because he's just hanging out there. You know, that's a situation where I think they would do it at that point. I still think they're gonna make a trade for a starting pitcher. Maybe it's not, you know, Castillo or Sonny Gray or something like that. Maybe it's like another, you know, decent number 2, number 3, somebody that's pretty solid that can give you innings. I still think they're going to bring one more person. You can't do a 6-man rotation, and you know Blackburn's not going to be back until like May or June. Like I don't think they want McGill in the rotation because that's what's going to happen. You know, we don't have 6 guys. I think there needs to be one more. So I'm going to say yes. One more starting pitch is going to be added to this rotation.
And then my follow-up question, the same one that you had for me in Santander, what do you think an Alex Bregman contract looks like, whether it's with the Mets or somebody else?
You know, I was doing the math earlier, just in case if it popped up out of nowhere. I was gonna do. Let me see, what was it?
Because by the way, you know, for context, the reason why the talks with the Astros stalled was that he wanted more than $150 million, which is what they were offering to him. So if we're talking a 5-year deal worth $30 million AAV, you know, that puts him right around $150 million. And if he doesn't want that, then what are we talking here? 6 for 180? That might be a little bit too much.
I was gonna say either 5 or 6 for 175. So that's around $29 million a year. That's what I was thinking of, because I had it in my history in my calculator while I was, because I'm setting up all my streams just in case we sign one of these guys, and I'm trying to do the math on what makes sense AAV wise. So I think 5 for 175. That's around $29.8 million a year, close to 30. I think that's exactly what he wants. I think the Tigers, it's going to be too rich for their blood. And I don't think the Red Sox are going to – I think they could do it money-wise, but I don't see them – Bregman, he might take the money, but if the Mets have a similar offer, I think he would go with the Mets because of the third base situation. So 5 years, 75 million, 175, 29 million, $29.8 million a year. So that's where I go with Bregman.
Very well. All right. That sounds good to me.
All right, guys. So another Mets Hot Stove in the books, episode 21. I know Chris got to go, but the good news is that there's still guys out there for the Mets to have. Probably, most likely, the Mets will sign somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning while I'm at work, and most of us are sleeping. So with that said, everybody have a great night. Have a good New Year's. We probably won't go live until probably after New Year's, most likely, unless something breaks. Other than that, everybody have a good New Year's, a safe New Year's. Chris, final words, and let's go Mets, guys.
Let's go Mets. Subscribe to both channels. Let's not forget that the New York Knicks are on a 7-game win streak. I'm actually going to go watch the game tonight. Hopefully they make it 8 in a row. So let's go Knicks. Let's go Mets. Again, subscribe, hit the thumbs up. Hopefully you all are enjoying these conversations. I'm enjoying reading everybody's live chat comments as well. If you have anything else that you all think of, feel free to hit the actual comment section even after the live stream is done. If there's anything that you forgot to mention, and I know we'll try to answer as best as possible when we get the free time. So be on the lookout. Hit the notifications buttons. You never know when we're going to go live or drop a new video. And yeah, I got a special maybe rebranding to go along in 2025 for the new year. I'll post something about it on my community tab poll, but that's still in the works. So be keeping an eye on that. But as always, let's go Mets, and hopefully we get a signing soon, just not tonight because I'll be at the Knicks game. Yeah, hopefully soon.
There you go, guys. Happy New Year, guys. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time on the Hot Stove. Good night, guys. Let's go Mets.
City lights in the dead of night, full of echo, concrete.